You're listening to the Bible Uncut and Unfiltered. We believe the Bible doesn't need to be watered down or cleaned up to be understood. Our goal is to provide a healing place to discuss the questions you can't ask and the context you won't learn in church. I'm your host, Colin Connor. Now, on to the episode. Welcome back, everyone, for a very special episode where we have a couple of first-time guests on the podcast with us here, Nate and Shelby Hanson of the Almost Heretical and Utterly Heretical podcasts. So, Nate and Shelby, thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, we're super excited and we're glad to be getting to know you too.
So I'll just take a second here and I'll tell you all listening. Almost Heretical was one of the first Christian podcasts that I ever listened to back when I was in college. And I wish I could remember for sure, but I'm pretty confident I found it when y'all did an interview with Tim Mackey back in the day, because I would listen to Bible Project, and so I saw that. And complete disclosure with everyone, Almost Heretical was completely heretical to me back then. So I think I got about 10 episodes in and said, all right, I need a break. But I came back a couple years
Fair enough.
later. Yeah. I came back a couple years later after, faith had developed a little bit, and I really appreciate everything they've talked through. Such a variety of topics, and I just wanted to give you all the little brief thing on their website here that says they aim to create a safe and inclusive community for those questioning, deconstructing, leaving, or changing in their relationship to God, church, and the Bible. Our goal is to make Christianity possible again by showing that Jesus is also outside the walls of church, having been cast out and silenced by those in religious power. We use the Bible as a tool to de-weaponize the Bible itself and open doors to conversation and dialogue that isn't allowed in most church settings. I love that, and it sounds pretty similar to what we say too. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I've been in the Almost Heretical community that they have for several years now, so this is something I've looked forward to for a while. So thank you all again for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, super excited to be chatting with you. And you are an active member of the community, which is awesome. And you share
Yeah.
some wonderful thoughts in there. So, really happy to get to talk to you.
Thanks, Nate. Let's just start up front here. For anyone who might not be familiar, what inspired you to create Almost Heretical? Because it's been what? Well, it's been like 7 years now, right? I think it was 2018.
Yeah, I think it launched 2018. We started recording 2017, and it all
Yeah.
came out of my former co host and I, who started the show with me, Tim Ritter. We were pastors together at the time down in San Francisco, California, and we were learning a lot of things, but also seeing a lot of things. He had an
Mhm.
experience in the church where there was some like kind of cover up, kind of weird stuff going on, and ended up
Yep.
being let go from a church, and a few others were let go, and so he kind of
Mm.
experienced more of the political side of the church world and kind of
Yeah.
church as a business and some of that kind of stuff. For me, it was a bit different. I was working with a prominent Christian author that everyone would know the name of, but I don't usually drop the name.
Yeah.
I do in our private groups and stuff, but
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a
try
little
to,
plug-in for the utterly heretical
yeah.
community right there.
Right. Yeah. And it's not just like I don't try to just gatekeep it. I
No.
really have a lot of respect for this person, and I don't want to be like, I'm out here trashing this. It's
Right.
like, yeah, it's complicated. It's a complicated story, but I was working with this author and we were planting churches in San Francisco. And yeah, just, it wasn't like a one day I woke up and did but it was like, I just started to think about some of the things we were teaching. We taught a lot about hell. We taught a lot about heaven and
Mm.
hell, and how, any minute these people that we're ministering to out on the street, like they're going to plunge into hell or they're going to go to heaven, and we have to get
Yep.
out there and save them from this. And I started kind of just thinking about that and thinking about the fact that, I think we talked about heaven and hell more than Jesus did. And so
Yeah.
that felt weird. And then, when that kind of domino starts to fall a little bit, then you start looking into other things. And as some who have experienced deconstruction know, those dominoes kind of fall pretty quickly. And you're like, okay, well, then
Hmm.
what can I hold on to? Like, what is true? What's real? And so through that process, Tim and I talked a lot for the course of like 2 years. We'd talk every day when he was going into the church he was working at the time down there, and when I was driving into the church I was working at, and we would just have these conversations where we talked about, well, what about grace? What about faith? What about the
Hmm.
resurrection? What about heaven and hell? What about? And we just talked through all this stuff, and I told him, I would tell him all the time, like, I feel like this would be helpful for people. I don't know of people having these conversations, and so I finally convinced him a couple years after that to turn some microphones on. We had both moved back. Well, I'd moved back to Oregon. He moved up to Oregon. And we started the conversations and started recording. Didn't know if anyone would listen, as the story goes, and
Yeah.
turns out there were a lot of people in that same boat of not wanting to ditch the whole thing, but not knowing how to hold on to some of it. Having a more, remember back in the old days when you could, maybe you still can on Facebook, set your relationship status to it's complicated. I
Right,
think
right.
that was sort of where we were and where we were finding a lot of other people. So that's where the
Mm.
show kind of started. And yeah, it took off from there. But those were the beginnings of Almost Heretical. And then years later, Shelby joined the show and we are also married. So we're married and we're co-hosts of the show together. So it's awesome.
Yeah, Shelby, you want to give a quick bit about what you bring into the podcast there? Because I know you have some biblical scholarship that influences a lot of what you all talk about.
Yeah, so I was doing my master's of biblical studies and doing some videos about kind of what I was learning, Dead Sea Scrolls, that kind of thing. And Nate
Mm.
reached out at that point, just interested in potentially having me on the show. That was how we first started talking. So thank you, Almost Radical.
Right.
And then yeah, so then obviously we kind of started our relationship. So I didn't join the podcast right away, but when we were pretty sure things were going to work out, then we were like, all right, let's get going. And so yeah, I'm kind of I have, like I said, Masters of Biblical Studies, specifically Dead Sea Scrolls and gender studies, and I just find it fascinating. And my background is, evangelical, homeschooled all the way,
Yep.
very fundamentalist, purity culture, all of it, all the
Hmm.
conservative stereotypes. And so questioning the Bible was, a huge step for me. And through my deconstruction process, I've never really let go of my love and fascination for the Bible, even though my relationship with it has changed. So I
Mm.
usually on the show kind of bring the content and the background of whatever we're going to talk about, and then Nate brings the questions, and I mean he's got the podcast skills. He used to be in radio as well, so
Yeah.
we make a good team.
You do. It's a good mix. I always enjoy whenever it comes out. I see the notification pop up. It's one of the first things I'll listen to, you know. So going back roughly to about 2018, Nate, that might be easier for the podcast, but Shelby, feel free to throw in around that time as well. What's something you might say you got completely wrong back in those early days, whether about faith, just podcasting, or life in general?
Yeah, sometimes I wish we talk about this a bit, but that I could go back and redo the
Mm.
beginning of the show. I think I had a lot of friends and family who were pretty surprised and shocked when the show came out. It came out, maybe let's see, 2 years after, 2 or 3 years after I moved back from San Francisco, and I think a lot of people didn't really know what happened when I left or what was going
Hmm.
on, or they just assumed I kind of got burnt out, and I think I did burnt out of the ministry life and just, in the tradition I was in there, it was very like every waking moment. It's like there's someone, that's dying right now. There's someone that's going to hell right
Hmm.
now. And, what are you doing sitting on the couch if there's a person next door who, did you go talk to him?
Yes.
Did you knock on their,
Yep.
so it's just that, I
I
mean,
felt all
I don't
that
know if
too.
someone's really, yeah.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
don't know if someone's run like the psychology on that, but it's very traumatizing to live your
Yes.
life that way. But I think it actually is the natural outworking of the theology we believed, which I'll give them that is,
Hmm.
I think it makes sense. If you think that there's an eternal damnation for those who don't believe a certain set of things, then, well, why wouldn't you be out trying to convince everyone you could every moment
Hmm.
of your life about those set of things, right? So I get it, and I was just all wrapped up into that. But the thing I feel like I got wrong isn't so much. I mean, yeah, my beliefs have changed even since beginning of the show a lot. I mean, a lot of stuff has changed. Maybe we'll get into that, but
Yeah.
it'd be less about that. It'd be less about, oh, I wish I hadn't, expressed that belief, because it's a journey, right? It's like
Yeah.
I was on a journey and was learning, growing, and just sharing about what I was learning and growing as I did it. But I think the thing I would change probably is probably just the way I would do it. I probably wouldn't have started the show
Mm.
when I started the show. I think we were a little bit more abrasive and in your face when we first started the show about like, we're going to show
Gotcha.
you behind the Christian machine, the curtain behind
Right. I
like
can see that. Yeah.
how messed up this whole thing is and how they're trying to manipulate you and how, like, I don't know if we said these kind of words, but I think that was the takeaway from some friends and family that were
Mm.
in that world still. And I actually I don't even know if I thought it at the time. I might have just, we kind of went along with it or something. I think Tim felt more that way maybe than I did. And
Mm.
I don't know where he is on that now, but yeah, like I think I didn't actually feel it. I definitely don't feel it now. I think I know the reasons why people do and say and believe the things they believe, and it's not some big like conspiracy to try to like use their power to. I think we just talked a lot about power and how like people are trying to use their power to control you. The men are trying to control the women, the leaders are
Hmm.
trying to control everyone else out there, and that no one wants to give up their power. And I think power is definitely a part of how we got our Bible and how we got the interpretations we did. And I don't think it's people out there like actively trying to manipulate and control and
Yeah.
suppress and oppress other people necessarily. So I think that's what I would have changed. I probably would have had those conversations with friends and family a little bit more
Mm.
like, here's what I'm learning, here's what I'm thinking about, like what do you think about this, and then talk about like this show I'm starting. They just like got a notification like you just talked about. They just got a
Right.
notification of like, here's a show. Like, wait, what? That's
Yeah.
Nate? Wait, what? So
Yeah.
I think I would have been a bit more just bold to like share those things. I'm kind of more of like
Mm.
behind the scenes, like I'm thinking all these things, but I don't really want to say them. Well, maybe I'll like just publish this and that'll be my
Yeah.
statement. And then so anyway, some of that didn't go over very well, but patched up a lot of that stuff and talked to a lot of
Mm.
those people. And anyway, that's my what I would change.
You
What do
made me
you?
think of Peter Rollins, I was just listening to
Yeah.
recently, talks about how with fundamentalism, you're not meant to take it seriously. Because if you do, you end up in all that anxiety where you're constantly worried about, I mean, heck, why can't I shave an hour off of sleep each night to go out and witness or something? Like the people who take it seriously are the people who actually end up leaving because you're not supposed to go that deep into it. But we weren't told that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We've talked about that, the fact that, I mean, Nate and I, we kind of knew who each other were growing up. We were in a similar,
Hmm.
like I said, homeschool circle. We just weren't really friends. But
Hmm.
probably out of all of that circle of people, we probably were the most extreme, like on fire for
Yeah.
Jesus. He went to San Francisco to plant churches. I went to China as a missionary. And then I was going to get Bible college to be a Bible translator. And then, we've talked a lot about it's probably no mere coincidence that we were the most extreme and then now we're the ones that left or at least left that version of our
Yeah.
faith. We're really out of that circle, some of the only ones whose faith has shifted as much as it has. So I
Hmm.
think there's something to be said for that. Yeah, that when you take something to its logical conclusion, when you take a belief like that in hell to its logical conclusion, then you find out that it's not sustainable. Like you can't actually live like that, and no one really lives like that.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to add on the things you might believe back in 18 that you'd say you'd do differently, Shelby?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't on the show in
Right.
2018, but
Or just roughly around that time whenever you were shifting in some what you
2018.
believed.
Well, I know your original question was like, what something that you realized you were completely wrong in? Do you
Yeah.
mean of my kind of original Christian
Yeah.
beliefs or
Yeah.
like at the
Like,
beginning of my progressive
oh
stages
yeah, maybe more like
of some
fundamentalist
belief?
days.
Oh yeah. Well, hell, I mean, we've talked about that a lot. That's
Yeah.
that's the first one. Once that goes, then you're allowed to ask the other questions. If you still
Mm.
believe in hell, then you're too afraid to ask those other
Hmm.
questions. So, I mean, I was obviously starting to ask questions because like I said, my emphasis was in gender studies and the more I felt kind of empowered and aligned with even just feminism, like basic feminism. I'm not talking like extremism, but just
Sure.
women should maybe be able to be leaders. And as I was going into Bible translation, I realized there's these passages in the Bible that, say women should be silent.
Mm.
And I first of all went, I don't I don't want to take that at face value like that. That seems bad.
Yeah.
And just having that thought, of course, feels very heretical when you're
Hmm.
taking scripture as the inspired word of God. But then also when I was considering going into Bible translation, I thought, well, I don't want to take this passage to a people group who maybe doesn't believe that and bring
Mm.
like the oppression of women to somewhere an unreached place in the world. So those
Mm.
things, both of those thoughts really made me stop and start to ask some questions I'd never asked before and eventually I studied the word hell and did some reading and realized that there are Christian denominations throughout history who don't believe in hell the same way. And I mean, I remember getting on my knees and like weeping when I discovered
Mm.
that because I just realized, yeah, I don't have to be afraid of this and I can ask these questions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there were a lot of things that I believed differently, obviously back then, but Yeah, those are some big ones.
We took it a
Yeah,
little
for sure.
differently. I took it like the beginning of the show when I first branched out with my new beliefs and what would I change about that time. And you took it like, yeah, some of your fundamentalists. So there you go. You get a little bit of both with us.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I think during that deconstruction process for a lot of people, it's very disorienting. There's kind of the stereotype of you go into this because it's sexy. This is what, you want the street cred kind of thing. It's like, no, you've obviously never deconstructed if you think that. And I think you can almost like compare it to losing your passport or having your citizenship revoked. Like you don't know how to get back home and you don't know where to go next. So, in these years since, what have you all learned about rebuilding community when you no longer fit in the ones that you're either currently in or have just recently left?
Yeah, that's funny that you brought up the street cred thing. Our old friend of mine, Josh Butler, wrote that
Mm,
for, what was that? Was that Gospel Coalition? Yeah. And
I
so
think
right when
so.
I
Yeah.
saw that got published, I started messaging him and I was like, dude, this is not
Yup.
that's not why people do. So I was like, you gotta talk to my wife because he hadn't met Shelby. And so like you guys
Mm,
jumped on a call, right? You guys, yeah. I can't remember how'd that go. Would you just said that's not why. None of these reasons.
Yeah, he wrote this article with what, 4 or 5 reasons why people deconstruct, and all of
right.
them were just absolutely written from the perspective of someone who's never deconstructed. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, we got on that call, and I just told him my story, and and I was like, you can't, none of these things can be true. So then what else can you say about me? But I don't know. He didn't wasn't super, I think, receptive to. I think once you just believe those things that, oh, this explains why people deconstruct, then you're not going to let, maybe the Bible isn't actually true be one of those reasons. So it's hard to, I mean, big asterisk there about what the word true means. We could go into
Yeah.
that. I do believe the Bible is true if you define it a certain way. So we can get there later.
Yeah,
But yeah,
for sure.
you brought up community and how do we
Mhm.
have we have we built and rebuilt community? That's a big theme of our last 2, 3 years and our marriage, really. Maybe you could get into some of what we've done and tried and all that.
Yeah. Okay. So we started off, well, we started off with not going to church or anything like that because we were both pretty burned out on it and just didn't, couldn't find anywhere that would match our beliefs. And I mean, our beliefs were changing a lot, so it was hard to find something. But
Sure.
I mean, we also live in Portland, Oregon, pretty progressive part of the world. So if you're going to look for a kind of more open-minded church, it's probably the place to be. And having kids, honestly, if we didn't have kids, I don't know if we would have been pushing to go back to church.
Mm.
My favorite form of community is the neighborhood, just
Yeah.
people who live life side by side because you literally live life side by side. And we live in a cul-de-sac, so I probably would have just been happy to call that enough. But
Mm.
what's interesting is how even though Nate and I have both left the version of Christianity we grew up with, in a sense, we really loved it. Like we
Mm.
both had wonderful childhoods. The churches we grew up in really were what you hope a church would be. They really were taking care of each other, growing each other, taking care of the community, reaching out. And we just had so many fun memories too of doing activities with our church group and youth group and we so we missed that for our kids. We wanted to find something like that for our kids. So we started going to a progressive church a little ways up into Portland, and that was a great place for a season, and I got to teach there, which was really fun. But it was just a bit too far away for us to feel like we were really getting that community. It's just the
Yeah.
drive and some other factors. So we came back here and we thought, you know what, we're just going to start our own thing, and we tried to start a totally non-religious weekly gathering. We actually posted it in our town has this Facebook group that has like thousands of people. And I mean, they
Yeah.
post everything from, the library events to like there's a cat on the side of the road and somebody
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
go get it. Like, it's a pretty fun group. But so we posted in there, like, is anyone interested in, a community that's kind of inspired by what church is, but it's not religious anymore, but,
Mm.
just people who kind of commit to each other for the long run to just live. And we got hundreds of responses of people who were saying,
Mm.
"Yes, I've been looking for this. Yes, I want this. I miss church and I don't fit there anymore, but I want something like that." So we were super excited and started just in a Grange potluck every Sunday. Turns out it's a lot easier to comment on Facebook than it is to show up. So only a
Yep.
few people showed up. We had a great experience with those people, but not enough to pay the rent. So
Mm-hmm.
We stopped that, and then we were just stuck. We're like, what do we do? How do we find a community? It's really hard to start from scratch. It's not impossible,
Yeah.
and kudos to the people who do, but it's just really hard. And we already have a life where we're trying to raise our kids, and and we homeschool them, and we work full time, and we do a podcast. We're like, we don't have time to try to create something brand new. So,
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, we've kind of at this point circled back to we are attending a totally normal evangelical Christian church. Basically, it's just the closest one to our house. You can
Yeah.
basically see it from our house. It's exactly what you would expect, the type of thing we grew up in. We don't align with their beliefs pretty
Mm.
much. I mean, most of them. I mean, women aren't even allowed to teach there. But
Mm.
but we kind of went, you know what? We want to be able to have community with people whether or not we agree on everything. Because if we're only going to have community with people who we 100% agree with, then one, it's going to be very hard to find, and two, it's
Yeah.
going to change the moment you change.
Yeah.
So we decided to just give it a go, and it's been really wonderful. We've been there over a year now, and our kids are enjoying it. We have complicated conversations with them when, they are taught things in Sunday school that, I'm not going to say that's wrong. I'm going to say, oh, there's other ways of thinking about that too. And I want to raise them to be people who can think about it for themselves and, ask good questions and know that they might believe different things than I do. And the ways that we grew up that we wouldn't want to repeat, we have the knowledge now to help our kids not go through that. We are going to talk to them about hell so that they know that they don't have to believe that. And we're going to talk to them about, whatever else might come up so that they have options. And
Mm.
it's all a big experiment, but that's where we are with community right now. I guess the long story
Yeah.
short is it's really hard to find. And not everyone could do what we're doing because some people have a lot more hurt and trauma around
Mm.
that. But it's been what works for us.
How have you found you're able to reconcile that? Like if let's say you're sitting in the church service and you had some wonderful conversations with people 30 minutes ago, but then you start hearing let's say it's a really problematic passage in Paul or something where it's telling women to shut up or maybe very anti certain groups of people or what have you. Shelby, I know you have the academic brain and Nate, you've been a pastor too. So like I know for me, when I would sit in church like that, I had a really hard time just being okay with disagreeing. So like how has that reconciled in your brain to where you're able to have that disagreement comfortably and not feel like you need to correct someone? Maybe that's just me, but
Yeah, no, that's a totally fair question. And I'd say I've definitely been seasons of my life where I would not have been able to do that. Also, I'll say that the church we're at, I think, is, at least at this point, hasn't been like it's not aggressive with its
okay, sure.
conservative beliefs. Like, I have not heard a sermon that I felt passionately like, how could they be saying this? But I would
Gotcha.
say, even if they were to get up there and preach about how women, can't teach or something, yeah, I mean, I'd probably feel a little fired up. But I would also go, I'm kind of in their territory in a sense. Like, I shouldn't, if I can't take that, then I just probably shouldn't be here. I'm not going to
Mm,
come and sit in their congregation and then fault them for saying what they believe. Like, I knew what they believed going into it. And I used to believe those same things. And so I know because of
yeah.
that they're not coming at it with any kind of malicious intent. Like, I used to
Hmm.
teach this exact same thing, and they are genuinely teaching what they believe the Bible says and what they believe the Bible tells them they should do and what they think God tells them they should do. So I think I am able to kind of, maybe this sounds bad or wrong to people, but in a lot of ways I would turn off my, I guess, yeah, to kind of turn off my, not my brain, but
The academic thinking side.
yeah, I guess I go into our church on Sunday mornings knowing that, like, I'm not here to agree with everything. Like, I'm here,
Mm,
honest. I mean, I only sit in the sermons because that's, part of the church part of church, but that's the
right.
least important part to us at this point. I
Mm.
don't know if I'm really answering the question well
No,
enough
I
or
think
not.
you are.
Well, I mean, the lead pastor of our church talked to you about this, asked you, what are you thinking when I'm saying, like, he was just fascinated that we would be interested in going because they know about our podcast and they know about, some of the things we think and how we think a bit differently than them. Not on everything, for sure. Like,
Sure.
in fact, I think most of the ways that you actually function in life and most of the ways that you care about, like, living like Jesus and the values, like, that's what we've told them too. Is like we're pretty aligned. Like as far as like what you want to bring into the world, what this church wants to bring into the
Mm,
world, and what we want to bring into the world, like we're pretty aligned on that. Now, are you gonna maybe we're gonna see Paul differently? Yeah,
right.
like sure. And
Mm,
are they gonna have a bit more certainty about things that we're more like I don't know. I hope that's true. That I hope in the resurrection, but like we can't like say scientifically that necessarily happened. Although I am getting into the
mm.
Shroud of Turin, and we're going to be doing
Ooh,
some stuff on
yeah.
that soon. So anyway,
Exciting.
yeah, I don't know, but the pastor, yeah, he's a super cool guy, but he had a conversation with you about that.
That's true. He did ask me like, "What are you thinking when you're sitting back there?" And I just told him I'm putting myself in your shoes and in your audience's shoes. And so I'm listening to
Mm,
your sermon from the perspective, and I can say, "Oh, that's a great point that he's making based on his interpretation of this passage." Or, "Oh, that's a great takeaway that he's giving them." So
mm.
I try to stay focused on the positives, and we happen to be at a church that's made that easy. So that's something to be grateful for.
And something we've been saying since the beginning of Almost Heretical is really caring about the fruit, which is what Jesus talked about a lot, is caring about the fruit of someone's life, someone's work, someone's everything. Like, what is this actually bringing into the world? Is this bringing goodness into the world, or is this bringing like bad, rotten stuff into the world? And so,
Mm.
even though I can go like, hey, some of these things I would see a bit differently, or I would maybe bring Paul down on the pedestal here a little bit, and
Sure.
I would, whatever. Ultimately, and this is where I come back to like Sermon on the Mount. I come back to fruits of the spirit and that kind of stuff. And I go like, what are you bringing into the world? Well, they're bringing a lot of great, wonderful things to the world. And these people are, caring about each other, caring about the community, doing stuff for the community, like helping each other, loving each other. Like there's a lot of joy in that building. And I was telling Shelby the other day, like it makes me want to be a part of it. It makes me want to be, it's
Mm,
like, as I was remembering when we were planting churches back in those days and just thinking like that was our whole message was it's the whole like they'll know we are Christians by our love kind of thing. The goal was
hmm
that they would see how committed you are to one another, kind of the early church type of stuff, how much you loved one another, how much you didn't care about your own stuff and your belongings, but you just wanted to give them to each other and you wanted to give them to others. And they'd be like, I
mm,
want some of that. Like, I want to be a part of some of that. And I feel like this is for the first time I'm like actually experiencing that. I didn't
mm,
experience that so much in the church that I was trying to create, the churches that we were planting, but I'm like experiencing it now. I'm realizing like, oh wow, it's not for me totally about like I agree with all the points they are making. There's been times in my life where I agreed with every single point we were making. I mean, I literally planted and created the church, right? That I was a part
mm,
of. So I could control that. And I still didn't feel that like I'm just so attracted to the love in this room and the love of this group towards each other and also to those on the outside. So I'll say that.
Yeah, I guess on that note of kind of what is the fruit that they're producing, I think probably a lot of us in the more, kind of progressive slash deconstructed, which is not always the same. Sometimes you can
true.
deconstruct and not necessarily be progressive.
Yeah.
Probably the majority is, but we can tend to maybe have a couple main kind of political social issues that we
Mm,
just allow that to determine your entire view of a
mm.
person. So for a lot of people, they
Yeah.
might look at this church and be like, they don't support women in leadership. They probably aren't LGBTQ plus affirming. They've never talked about that. I'm just kind of assuming they're probably not. But
Mm,
and probably those two issues would make most people go, I can't even consider it. And for some, that might be the best choice for them. Like that's totally fine. But I I would encourage us to have a more complicated view that allows you to still see all the other things that this community is doing and go,
mm,
what is the fruit of their actions? Is there a 2 or 3% that you don't like? Okay,
mm,
that's legitimate. But is there still 95, 6, 7% of what they're doing is good? Is, reaching out to supporting people in prison and their relationships with their
mm,
children and supporting, the literacy for children in Haiti and supporting, the food banks that are local and giving like there's a lot of good that they're doing. And so I would hate for us to just completely bash on them because we don't agree with a couple of points.
I appreciate you both bringing that up because I'll take a second here and I'll just plug in your utterly heretical community because I came from extremely fundamentalist conservative circles and I am more in progressive Christian circles now, and something I've seen in both is fundamentalism, a very clearly defined in and out group, and it's like you just switch it for which end of the spectrum you're on, but you still treat people the same way. and something I've seen you all try to do very well, I'd say you have done with your community, is keep it open for anyone, whether they're on progressive, conservative, somewhere in between, who knows where. Life isn't always as black and white as we like to make it. And I know just me personally, coming from a fundamentalist background, it's really easy to slip back into that. So every once in a while, I just like to, well, it used to be the Facebook group, but now it's on Patreon and everything. Yeah, I'll just pop in there and be like, okay, there are other good people, feel a little bit differently, and it's good to remember that and talk with them. So I really appreciate how you've tried to build that nuance.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that message us that maybe don't feel comfortable like posting or something. They're like, "I'm so glad you're building this place because I'm where you are, and I just, I haven't aligned politically with the progressive movement." And we're like,
Hmm.
"Hey, totally get it, and we're not probably as progressive as people think we are,
Yeah,
first of all,
sure.
but also just yeah, we didn't like the idea that like, hey, you have to go from this camp to this new camp. And it wasn't that way when Almost Heretical first started. It didn't feel as much
Mm.
like you have to leave this thing and now there's this new thing you join. And then it slowly I started to watch the walls kind of get built around this new deconstructed movement.
Hmm.
It used to feel more like it feels weird to say this because it feels like this new thing still, but like this was 10 years ago and it feels like
Yeah.
10 years ago when I started kind of like when I left San Francisco and I started my journey of rethinking things but like it used to feel like it was this kind of wild west of like wow I'm like
Yes.
I broke free and now I'm like out here and I don't really know what to think and then the
Right.
walls people I don't know we just do this like humans do this I don't
We
know.
colonize deconstruction.
Yeah, exactly. And then like you start to now if you like Google the term, it's like, well, the Gospel Coalition's got their thing on it, and
Hmm.
Desiring God's got their thing on it, and Relevant Magazine's got their thing on it. And it's just everything, the walls start to get drawn by both sides. People that agree with it
Yep.
and don't agree with it, like everyone starts to draw these walls. And then you're like, okay, well, am I in that? Like, do I want to be all in that thing? And I started to realize, I think we kind of started to realize, like, no, we don't sign up and agree for with everything that's in this group now. And so we're like, well, what do we need to do? Go create a new thing and call it, I don't even know. What is some new term, which is another thing that people love to do is the terms and the,
Right.
exvangelical and the empty the pews and the, all these hashtags and
Hmm.
stuff. Like I didn't resonate with most of them. And I definitely don't
Hmm.
resonate with the progressive Christian label. So we realized we don't fit, and we were like, I bet there's other people that feel like they don't fit as well. So we're
Yeah.
all about like not recreating walls and not trying to box people in again. And we want people to be complicated. We're looking at like this ancient text, some of the texts that are in the Bible, and some that didn't make it in or they got ousted in the Reformation or whatever. And we're saying we're just fascinated with this and lots of different people can be fascinated with that. There's people that are sitting in the pews next to us that are probably fascinated with the Bible as an ancient text and what can we know about this? If we go back and like play it as a timeline and like, oh, and then this got added, oh, and then this got taken out, and then, like, oh, they were sitting in a room and they were like, some scribe was writing this, but maybe it wasn't even Matthew that was there. Maybe it was like someone. Anyways,
Mm.
we're just fascinated with that kind of stuff, and I think lots of different kinds of people can be fascinated with that. And I'd hate to draw some thick walls around this group that keeps people out just because they didn't vote for someone or they
Mm.
think differently about political topics. And I get there's people involved in some of those political topics too, and but still, like, we're not trying to keep people out basically.
Yeah. Love how you said that. You did mention a little bit ago how having kids influenced a little bit of the transition, finding community. As you have raised kids in the aftermath of your own faith shifts, what do you think is one thing that you hope they will embrace about faith and something that you hope they'll reject?
I talk a lot with our oldest just about the broad road and the narrow road. And
Mm.
I know when I say that, for some that maybe don't feel like maybe they've deconstructed pretty hard and they're like, I'm out of that. Why is he bringing up the broad road and the narrow road? Like,
Mm.
why is he talking about a road that leads to hell? It's like, well, first of all, it never says it leads to hell. That's a
Yeah,
that's a big part of it.
true.
But I've often viewed my life in that way of like, I don't want to do what everyone does. And just even from like a not from like even a Christian perspective sometimes, but just like I don't want to go down that road. And so many people are just unhappy. They get to a point where they're an old man and they're just grumpy and they are sad. And it's like I don't want to do what the majority do. I don't want to go down that
Yes.
broad road. And it takes effort and determination to swim against that current and to to go this other direction and to break out of that. And so that was given to me. Obviously, that concept is in the Bible, and that was given to me through Christianity. And so I think that's where I got that, obviously. And but it's this perspective I've had. And so I think I've always viewed things that way, as like, if I'm going the direction that like everyone's going, and it's just like, yeah, it's just easy to like, hey, give your kid an iPad, just like put your kid in
You're
front of
right.
an
You're right.
iPad when you're at the restaurant because, hey, the adults want to talk. It's like, hey, no, can we do something different here? It's a little more difficult. It's a
Mm.
lot more difficult sometimes, especially if you've already given your kid an iPad. It's more
Yeah.
difficult, but like, hey, can we try to do something different here and like
Mm.
raise our kid how to be able to talk to adults, how to be able to talk to that server that just came to the table. Like, yeah, we're gonna
Mm.
look weird, and it's gonna be more difficult, and there might be some tantrums at the beginning or whatever, but can we swim against that current a bit? So just like looking at
Mm.
things like that and saying like, how can we do this differently? That's something I hope the kids get from us in the way we live our life and the way we try to bring them along in the way we live our life. Something I wish they don't get. I don't know. I guess harmful views about like the trauma that comes with like believing that you could be eternally separated from any kind of
Mm.
divine being like God, like that there's a creator, and there's a someone behind this that is keeping this whole thing in motion, and is, I don't know if some people believe in control, not control, whatever, but like that there's someone behind all this, and you could be eternally separated from that person and possibly tortured for all of time.
Mm.
That's pretty traumatic, and I think there's a reason why for a lot of us it still wakes us up in the middle of the night sometimes, and we're like, so
Yeah.
I hope they don't get that. Yeah.
Mm. Well said.
Yeah, I think I would hope that they are able to take wonder, like the sense of wonder. Like when I think about my most Christian days, especially kind of in college, kind of right before I started deconstructing, and my prayer life was so vibrant, and I felt like there was just magic everywhere. Like I just felt like I was
Mm-hmm.
listening for God, and I really miss that. And I'm still trying to figure out what of that I can get back. I'm just allowing the journey to go nice and slow. So yeah, send me all the resources you want. But yeah, so I would hope that they come away with a sense of wonder, though I'm not sure what that'll look like. And just Jesus as a figure worth imitating. Like I said, we homeschool, so the first thing we do in the morning is memory work, and I quiz them on dates and sing the water cycle song and tell me the
Mm.
Pledge of Allegiance, and then we have a bunch of quotes. So they have like a quote by Winston Churchill, a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, and then I say a quote from Jesus, and they say, "Do unto others as you would have them do to you." So
Mm.
just he's one of those figures. And when Easter happened recently, we spent the week looking through the story. I got to kind of control how I wanted that story to come across, but I wanted them to learn, especially the oldest at this point. Just she's the one kind of digging a little deeper, like what was happening. So and I was proud that at the end of the week, I think if someone was to ask her why did Jesus die on the cross, she
Mm.
wouldn't say for our sins, which is I think
Mm.
what the typical answer would be. She would probably say because he claimed to be a king and they didn't like that.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's I guess I still love Jesus and the stories of the Bible. I love them so much. Like whenever anything comes up, I'm
Mm.
like, oh guys, let me tell you this story from the Bible. And I'll be like, there was this guy named Joseph and he had all these brothers. And then they just listen and they like these
Mm.
stories are fascinating. So
Oh yeah.
I guess I should change my first answer. The thing I most want them to come away with is feeling this sense of kind of a heritage and
Mm.
a culture, a collection of characters and literature that means something because that meant a lot to me and it still does. It's the foundation of my framework for the world and in a lot of ways is a really good one.
Yeah. Love it. If there's anything that you could go back and have just a 5-minute conversation with your pre-deconstructed self, what do you think you would say to them?
Yeah. I think similar to maybe how I answered one of the first questions regarding being careful and cautious and thoughtful with others who haven't experienced something. I think I would say that I was picturing that person getting myself at that point preparing to go through all this, and I would just want to be
Mm.
like, hey, like chill a little bit, like chill where you are right now a little bit, but also
Yeah.
chill as you are about to go through this. Like, I guess, but that to that person directly, I would myself at that time, I would say, I would try to get myself quicker to that point of realizing that, some of the things you're thinking and teaching have long lasting ramifications as far as hell, and is this actually bringing goodness into the world? Is this
Mm.
making people better? Is this making people love each other more and love their communities more and that kind of thing? Or is it kind of trying to talk them into this way of like escaping the world and escaping what's right around them right now, even just mentally escaping it, right? It's like to a metaphysical kind of place. And so, yeah, I think it would be something like that about like calm down a bit. And the other one I just thought of too is like I was
Mm.
trying really, really hard to be like the church planter pastor guy. And I probably
Mm.
never would have checked those boxes on the personality test of like, it feels like we always choose the same kind of guy to be the church planter guy. He's like kind of funny and gregarious. And I mean, I'm funny, but like, I'm not like the outgoing. I was trying so hard to be like outgoing and like, connection
Charismatic.
guy, charismatic and
Yeah,
like,
it's similar to the youth pastor vibe.
right. Yeah. And I was just trying so hard to fit into that box because I
Mm.
wanted to be like church planter guy. And so I would just say like, find your passions, interests, the things that you do naturally and enjoy naturally and
Mm.
come out of you naturally. And so I would say spend some time focusing on that. Don't worry so much about trying to, it's like I wanted to be this end result, and so now I have to do this path to get to that end result. Instead, like who are you actually and what are your
Mm.
strengths actually? Even in that world, I wish I would have done that a bit more. And something about like God isn't angry at you and you're not separated from
Mm.
God. Like I wish I would have thought about that more. I remember the first time I read during deconstruction early on, some 9 or 10 years ago, I read William Paul Young's Lies We Believe About God.
Mm.
And I just remember thinking like, gosh, if I had had God presented to me this way, I just remember crying reading that book and just thinking like, wow, this isn't the God that I knew. And I don't think I ever would have
Mm.
like left or changed probably if I had thought about this kind of God of love. So anyway, I think I
Mm.
would have wanted to, you know, nudge myself in that direction back then.
Mm. Wise words, Shelby.
Man, I have really spent the whole time Nate was talking trying to think about the answer to this question because this
Mm.
is actually really tough. Partially just because I think going back to that my pre-deconstruction self, like I was just so genuine the whole time that
Hmm.
I, if I was to try to give myself some warning or piece of advice or something, it would just start the process of deconstruction, this grief. Like, it really was, that's what I've just been thinking about. It was such a grief
Mm.
journey because I was so committed and just in love with this version of Jesus that I had and this relationship that I had that I mean there's no way to soften that blow. This is just what
Mm.
I've been kind of over here pondering. I guess I
Mm.
would have if I could maybe two things if I could have gone back to my 13, 14-year-old self, I would have told that version similar to what Nate said of like God's not gonna throw you into hell for being lukewarm. That was my terror of
Hmm.
the Revelation 3:16.
100%.
And also to tell myself like you're not a horrible like I was trying to I when I read my prayer journals
Mm.
from that time of my life, I was trying to convince
Mm.
myself that I was this horrible person because the Bible said I
Yep.
was. The Bible was saying, you are filthy rags. Everything about you is,
Mm.
you deserve like Jesus had to die because of how bad you were. And I remember trying to convince myself that I was that bad. When I look back now, I'm like, I wasn't that bad. Like I was a
Mm.
pretty good kid. And it's just sad to see that. So, yeah, I think maybe the summary of it all would be don't be afraid. Even when I go to the version of me that was about to start deconstructing, I probably would just tell that version, don't be afraid. Like you're not alone.
Mm.
There is going to be something on the other side. Like you're going to be okay.
Mm. Beautifully said, and very Christian, right? Perfect love casts out fear. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we're getting close to time here, so with the last couple minutes, I just want to ask if there's anyone listening that maybe feels like they're outgrowing the faith they were handed, but they don't know where to start. What resources, heretical or otherwise, would you say have helped in those next steps and you might recommend to someone?
The first thing we usually recommend if you're looking for something to read is Rachel Held Evans. Her books,
Mm.
Searching for Sunday,
Yep.
is Faith Unraveled,
I'm listening
Inspired
to
about the Bible.
Yep, that's the one I'm listening to right now.
Yeah. They're all just really such a beautiful perspective that's gentle. It takes that next step maybe away from the faith that you grew up with, which is probably what you're looking for, but
Mm,
it's not aggressive, it's not abrasive. It's looking for the beauty
absolutely.
of it, and it still like respects the faith that you grew up with as well and the people that are still there. So we really, yeah, she's very influential for both of us. You're obviously welcome to listen to our podcast
Yeah.
if it's right for you. I'm trying to think if there's any other great resources off the top of our heads. I enjoy Barbara Brown Taylor too. Her book Holy
Mm,
Envy is really, really remarkable.
Yeah, I
good.
don't have much more to add. I think I would just say be careful not to swing the pendulum too far. There's a
Yes.
natural human instinct to want to run away from something that you're realizing may have been incorrect, or for some people, this wasn't my experience, but for some people may have hurt you.
Mm,
And there's an instinct to get as far away from it as possible. I just, wow, Simba and the Lion King just ran to me. Like, it came to my mind. It's
go
like,
for
get
it.
as far away as possible, and then you got to
Right,
like
right.
come back, Return of the King, whatnot. That's a whole nother thing. Anyways, but
We just crossed over Lion King and Lord of the
yeah,
Rings here.
I just brought them together. I brought it all together. But yeah, just try not to do that. Try not to reject every person that was in that world
Mm,
that you're now feeling like might
mm,
not be the place you want to be fully anymore. Try not to reject every idea that comes from that world. And also, this is maybe the more difficult one, but try to stay in that world. Try to stay with those people.
mm,
That's challenging, and we live in a time where everyone kind of retreats to the areas that and the places that literally they move to other cities because people agree with them more there. And I think we have to be careful to not do
mm.
that. It's it's just like this filtering process, and slowly everyone who thinks like you is around you and everyone who doesn't is in some other place. And I think we all know that's not working, right? I mean, I think we
Mm,
all know one of the first things you hear when you talk to another person, they're just like, hey, everyone's so divided. Everyone's just so, you know, mean to each other on social media. And it's like,
yeah,
do
we're
we
all
like
feeling that.
yeah, like do we like where we've ended up here as a
Mm,
society? And so I would just I would just nudge someone to, even though you're feeling that like, hey, some of the stuff my pastor's starting to say like isn't resonating with me as much anymore because I'm starting to read this other stuff, or I heard this episode on Almost Heretical, or Colin was talking about this thing, and so that and but my
right.
pastor said this other thing. I feel like I need to leave that now. And it's like maybe, and maybe
Yeah.
there's another church that fits, or not a church for a little while, or
Hmm.
whatever. But yeah, just be careful to not build don't build the walls. Don't build the walls
Mm,
between you and other people that you've maybe loved for years, and ideas and beliefs that you've had for years. Maybe don't just build all the walls and knock everything down, because you might regret it later a bit.
mm,
Yeah.
Yeah, we could probably go on and on about our advice for people who are beginning the journey. I was just thinking, like, have grace for yourself and for the people around you, especially if
mm,
you're still in a kind of Christian community. They're probably those people around you are going to be scared of what's happening to you, and they're going
mm,
to push back on what you might be saying. And yeah, just have grace for them. Remember what it was to be in their shoes, and then have
mm.
grace for yourself in the sense of you don't have to have the answers to everything that they're going to ask you.
Right.
They've spent their whole lives learning all the responses to everything, and you're just beginning this journey. So just know that it's
Mm.
okay to say, I don't know, I'm just asking questions about this. I don't know. I'm just learning. Just
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
It's okay to not have
things
the
just aren't
answers.
sitting right now. Yeah, I just exactly just
Yeah.
thinking about it. Yeah.
No, that's really good. And I think I even brought this up recently in the community because this was kind of something similar you all talked about in a recent episode. And I'm in a lot of circles that push you to be all or nothing, just on the other end of the spectrum. And you all brought up something along those lines recently, and it's been something I'm mulling over, going, okay, where there's a line to draw sometimes, and there's also the time to sit and just disagree with people and be okay with that. And that can be hard to figure out, but it's really needed. And I appreciate that you bring that up. So I will just say to anyone listening, please go ahead and check out Almost Heretical on your favorite podcast players. I definitely recommend it. It has been one of my favorite podcasts to listen to for the last several years now. And go ahead and support them on Patreon as well with the Utterly Heretical. It's what, about once every other week? I think you guys do the extra
Yeah,
episodes.
we do a bonus like questions episode, and then we have guests on. We do like a we kind of talk after for a
Yeah,
bit,
like an
after
after
show
hours
kind
thing
of
there.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we
So
build a
it
community.
doesn't cost too much. It's well worth it for what they do there. So Nate and Shelby, thank you again for being on here with us today. If you want to take the last minute, rep anything that you want to, and any final words to the audience.
Yeah, just stay curious, keep asking questions about the uncut and unfiltered Bible, and really appreciate talking to you, Colin, and your involvement in the group and how thoughtful you are and where you're leading this show. I think it's great. So appreciate having you on this journey with us.
Thank you both. We'll talk soon, I'm sure.
You've been listening to
Awesome.
the Bible Uncut and Unfiltered. We hope we provided a healing place to discuss the questions you can't ask and the context you won't learn in church. If you enjoyed the podcast, would you take a minute to share it with a friend? You could also rate and review on your podcast app. If you'd like to donate to keep our work going, you can go to our website, thebibleuncut.com, and click on the Support Us tab. While you're there, check out the recommended resources and blog where we post show notes and other articles. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.